What if a dog waited for 3 years in the same exact spot? Not for food, not for a new home, but for someone who might never come back. In the middle of nowhere, beside an old red mailbox, through snow, thunder, and blistering heat, a pale yellow Labrador sits alone. Every single day. Locals call him the mailbox ghost. But what if he's not a ghost at all? What if he remembers something none of us do? Stay with this story, because what happens next will break your heart, and then mend it. Bailey, the dog who waited by the red mailbox. The wind whispered across the quiet plains of Hopewell, Montana, where an old red mailbox stood like a forgotten memory. And beside it, day after day, sat a pale yellow Labrador named Bailey. He didn't bark, didn't play, he just watched the road. For nearly 3 years, he waited in silence, as if the gravel beneath him held a promise only he remembered. No one knew who he was waiting for, but he never stopped, not once. Hopewell, Montana, was the kind of place where nothing rushed, not even the wind. In early October, the sky hung low, heavy with thick gray clouds. The air held a damp chill, not quite winter but no longer fall, and the golden fields that once danced in the sun now lay subdued beneath the weight of frost-tipped grasses. On the outskirts of this sleepy town, where Route 47 curved into gravel and disappeared into the prairie, an old red mailbox stood alone at the bend. Rust streaked down its sides, and the wooden post beneath it leaned slightly from years of weather and neglect. But no one noticed the mailbox anymore. They noticed the dog. Bailey had been there every day for almost 3 years. A pale yellow Labrador, around 6 years old, with a thick, slightly unkempt coat that had faded from its golden hue into something closer to sand. His frame was sturdy, but no longer youthful broad shoulders, tired joints, a few old scars hidden beneath his fur. His eyes, though, told the real story. They were the warm brown of river mud, soft but distant, like they had seen too much and remembered every bit of it. He sat just to the left of the mailbox, paws neatly folded beneath him, tail tucked close, always facing the road, always watching. People called him the mailbox dog. Others, more whimsically, referred to him as the ghost of Route 47. He never barked, never chased anyone, and never wandered. It didn't matter the season. In winter, he curled into a ball as snow piled on his back. In summer, he lay flat in the dirt, tongue out, beneath the sparse shadow of the mailbox post. When it rained, he simply sat there, blinking through the drops. He refused any leash. He avoided hands. If someone came too close, he'd rise, take a few steps back, and sit again watchful but never hostile. The first person in Hopewell to take real notice of Bailey was Martha Bell, 63, a retired librarian with tightly curled silver hair, sharp green eyes, and a spine as straight as the day she left college. She lived alone in a pale blue house at the edge of town and had a habit of morning walks that took her past the old road. Martha had known the mailbox long before Bailey made it famous. She remembered when the farm it belonged to was still standing, before it burned down in a lightning storm 15 years ago. When Bailey appeared one morning 3 years ago, she thought it was a coincidence. When he was still there the next week, she brought a boiled egg and left it near the post. He didn't touch it while she watched. But when she returned the next day, the egg was gone. So, she started bringing food every morning. Boiled eggs, plain rice, sometimes bits of ham. And always, she walked away before he approached. Others followed her lead. Troy Haywood, a mechanic with grease-stained hands and a quiet heart, started leaving water bowls. Lila Jennings, a second-grade teacher with freckles and a fondness for stray cats, once tried to lure Bailey into her car with treats. She simply turned his head and refused to move. Even the kids in town knew the rules. Don't pet the mailbox dog. Don't crowd him. Don't try to take him home. You could watch. You could talk to him from a distance, but you couldn't touch him. It became part of Hopewell's rhythm, the same way they knew when the sun would set behind the silo or when the coffee at Earl's Diner would go from fresh to bitter. Bailey was just there. The stillness at the center of the storm no one could see. There were theories, of course. People talked. Some said he belonged to a farmer who died in a tractor accident. Others claimed he had once been part of a traveling family who broke down on the road and never returned. One man swore he'd seen a child with that dog once, years ago, playing with a red frisbee right near the bend. No one could prove anything, and Bailey never gave any answers. By the time the third autumn rolled in, the townspeople had stopped asking. It was enough to know he was there. That someone or something had once mattered enough for a dog to wait 3 years beside a rusting mailbox in the middle of nowhere. That morning, as the sky teased snow and the prairie whispered of coming cold, Martha walked past as usual, a boiled egg in her gloved hand. She set it down on the flat rock near the post. Bailey didn't look at her. He never did, but as she turned away, she glanced over her shoulder and whispered, "Still waiting, huh, boy?" And for the briefest second, his ear twitched. He was still waiting. The morning sky over Hopewell was bruised, lavender, and pale steel, a sign that winter would arrive early this year. A light wind rolled through the fields, carrying with it the scent of frozen soil and burnt wood from nearby chimneys. At the edge of Route 47, the red mailbox stood as it always did, and beside it, Bailey waited still as a statue, eyes fixed down the endless road. But this day, someone new was watching. Eli Thompson had driven through 100 towns, just like Hopewell, quiet, weathered, and forgotten by the speed of modern life. At 29, he had made a career as a freelance journalist, specializing in stories that didn't make national headlines but lingered in the heart. He stood about 5'11", lean but strong, with close-cropped sandy brown hair and sharp green eyes that always looked like they were mid-thought. His jaw was dusted with the beginning of a beard, and he wore a threadbare wool coat with a camera strap slung diagonally across his chest. Eli hadn't planned to stop in Hopewell. He had been on his way to Great Falls to cover a story on rural education, but a road closure detoured him through the sleepy town. He had just pulled into a gas station for coffee when he saw the dog. At first, he thought it was a trick of the landscapee, a piece of driftwood maybe, or a faded sign. But then the creature moved, ever so slightly, and Eli saw the rise and fall of its chest, the turn of its head, the way its ears twitched at the sound of a distant truck engine. That stillness wasn't apathy. It was attention, purpose. The gas station attendant was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s named Rick Marlowe, with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow and a southern drawl that lingered even after 2 decades in Montana. When Eli asked about the dog, Rick shrugged like he'd been waiting for someone to finally care. "That's Bailey," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Been sitting there about 3 years. Folks feed him, but he don't let no one get close. Just waits by that box like he's on a mission." Eli was hooked. There was something sacred about a dog that waited. He'd heard of loyalty, but this was devotion sculpted into bone. He asked a few more questions, made notes on his phone, and then drove down the gravel road to see for himself. Bailey didn't flinch as the car approached. He simply lifted his head and stared with the kind of look Eli had only seen in combat veterans alert, exhausted, unyielding. That night, after checking into the Rose Lantern Motella roadside inn with flickering neon and outdated wallpaper, Eli sat on the edge of the bed and reviewed the footage he had taken. The motel owner, Janet Mayfield, was a kind but tired woman in her mid-50s with shoulder-length blonde-gray hair, a limp in her left leg from a riding accident years ago, and a fondness for black coffee and mystery novels. She knocked on his door with a wool blanket and a thermos of cider, saying, "If you're going to be poking around that dog, you'll need these. Nights get mean out here." Eli thanked her and promised to return the blanket clean. Just before sunset, he drove back to the mailbox. The light was perfect soft gold folding into long blue shadows. He set up his tripod from a distance, careful not to disturb the dog. Through the lens, he watched Bailey as if through glass. The dog didn't move. but his eyes did tracking every car, every bird, every rustle of wind in the grass. And in those eyes, Eli saw something raw. Pain. Yes, but more than that. A memory. As if Bailey wasn't waiting because he was lost, but because he remembered exactly where he needed to be. Eli whispered into his mic, "There's a story here. A dog who waits. Through seasons, through storms, through silence, and maybe, just maybe, through grief." After packing up, he stopped at the diner near the center of town. Martha Bell was working the counter, same as every night. She poured him a cup of coffee and said, "You're the fella asking about Bailey." Eli nodded and asked if she knew the dog's history. Martha pursed her lips. "No one really does. He just showed up one day and never left. Folks say he came from a wreck out on the Old North Road, but nobody's sure. All we know is he's waiting for something, or someone." Eli spent that night searching local archives online. No mention of a dog named Bailey, no lost pet ads that matched. But something tugged at him, a piece of a puzzle still hiding in the dark. He decided to stay longer. Maybe a day, maybe two. He wanted to understand who Bailey was waiting for and why. And so the next morning, while the sky yawned open with silver light and frostbit at the windows of the motel, Eli returned to the road. Bailey was already there, sitting by the mailbox like always. And Ella recorder in hand, questions circling, was ready to listen. The sky over Hopewell darkened earlier now, the sun sinking low by late afternoon, casting long, gold-drenched shadows over the town's quiet fields. Eli sat hunched over his laptop at a corner booth in Martha's diner, the smell of fried potatoes and old coffee clinging to his coat. Outside, Bailey remained in his usual place beside the red mailbox, unmoved by time or temperature. But inside the diner, the puzzle of the dog's past was finally starting to come together. Eli had spent the last 2 days tracing through local records, digging deeper than the town's half-told stories. After hours of searching, he discovered an old newspaper clipping buried in the archives of the Hopewell Ledger, dated the 17th of August, 3 years ago. The headline read, "Tragic accident on Route 47 claims life of local woman." The brief article described a devastating car accident that occurred near the very road Bailey now called home. A family returning from a summer camp weekend had been struck by a semi-truck on a blind curve. The mother, Laura Parker, 36, died at the scene. The father, Daniel Parker, 38 at the time, and their 12-year-old son, Henry, survived, but were hospitalized with serious injuries. The article mentioned one more passenger, a family dog who fled the scene and was never recovered. Eli stared at the screen. The pieces began to align in his mind. Bailey wasn't just waiting, he was remembering, and the spot he chose wasn't random. It was the last place he saw them. Driven by the revelation, Eli dug deeper, searching through public databases, vet records, and social media threads until he found a trail that led to Bozeman, Montana. Daniel Parker had moved there with his son a year after the accident. A public Facebook profile revealed a blurry picture of a teenage boy holding a Labrador puppy posted years earlier. Same cream-colored coat. Same alert ears. The caption read, "Henry and Bailey, 2 peas in a pod." The image froze Eli in place. He opened his video editing software, took the footage he'd captured of Bailey beside the red mailbox, and added a few words. Dramatic narration, no music. Just the wind, the gravel, and a title screen, "The Dog Who Never Left." He uploaded it to YouTube and cross-posted on Facebook and Twitter with a short caption, "This dog has been waiting by the same red mailbox for 3 years. Does anyone recognize him?" Then he closed his laptop and waited. It didn't take long. By nightfall, the video had racked up thousands of views. The comments flooded in, some offering to adopt Bailey, others sharing similar stories of loyalty. But one comment, posted beneath the video just before midnight, caught Eli's attention like a spark in a dark room. "I know this dog. That's Bailey. He used to be ours." The comment was signed simply, Henry P. Eli's heart pounded. He clicked the profile. The picture matched the same teenager from Bozeman, taller, leaner, but with the same brown eyes that had once sparkled beside a puppy. Eli sent a direct message immediately, typing fast but careful. "Hi, Henry. This is Eli Thompson. I'm a journalist in Hopewell. Are you sure that's your dog in the video?" The reply came faster than Eli expected. "Yes, I'm sure. It's him. It's Bailey. I thought he was dead." A pause. Then another message. "Can I talk to you?" Eli sent his number. The call came seconds later. Henry's voice had a tremble in it, still carrying the softness of a boy but the weight of something much older. "He was with us that day," he said. "In the car. When it happened, I remember everything. I was holding him when we got hit." Eli listened as Henry recounted the crash, the sudden lights, the sound of metal crumpling, the silence that followed. How he'd been pulled from the wreckage with a broken arm and a concussion. How his mother never made it. How Bailey had vanished into the chaos. "I screamed for him," Henry said, his voice breaking. "We looked for days, weeks. My dad even put up flyers called shelters, posted online. Nothing. We thought he was gone." The call ended with Henry whispering, "Thank you for finding him," and Eli promising to stay by Bailey's side until they could come. Eli didn't sleep that night. He sat in his motel room, wrapped in Janet's blanket, watching Bailey through the frosted window. Hopewell was still, but Eli's heart buzzed with urgency. He hadn't just found a story. He'd found a piece of someone's soul, sitting silently beside a red mailbox. The road from Bozeman to Hopewell was long and winding, stretching over dark mountain passes and sleepy two-lane highways. Daniel Parker, now 41, with crow's feet deepening around his pale blue eyes and streaks of gray creeping into his short, dark hair, kept both hands tight on the wheel. His posture was stiff, shoulders high with tension. He had always been a man of quiet resolve, a civil engineer who preferred numbers to people. But tonight he was running on something beyond logic, was chasing a ghost his son swore was real. In the passenger seat, Henry Parker sat with his knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them. At 15, Henry was all limp-stall and lean, with shaggy brown hair that fell into his hazel eyes. He carried himself with the quiet thoughtfulness of a boy who had been forced to grow up too fast. The scar on his left forearm from the accident was faint now, but the one on his heart hadn't faded. He hadn't spoken much since the phone call with Eli. Just one word, again and again, barely louder than a whisper. Bailey. The drive took nearly 8 hours. They arrived just before dawn, the horizon still clinging to indigo before surrendering to gray. As they pulled off Route 47 and rolled slowly down the gravel road, Daniel turned off the headlights. "You sure this is the place?" he asked. Henry nodded, his voice hoarse. "That's the mailbox." And there he was. Bailey. The pale yellow Labrador stood exactly where Eli had filmed him, beside the rusted red mailbox, motionless except for the soft rise and fall of his chest. But something was different. As the car approached, Bailey stood. Not with fear or caution, but with awareness. His ears perked forward. His tail stiffened slightly. He stared at the vehicle as if he could feel something pulling him forward through time. Henry pushed the car door open and stepped out slowly, his breath plumed in the cold air. "Bailey?" he called, barely above a whisper. The name broke the stillness like a church bell in silence. Bailey froze. Then, in a single motion, he tilted his head, sniffed the air, and took one step forward. Henry took one too. Bailey's body trembled. His tail gave the slightest flick. Then he ran. Henry fell to his knees as the Labrador bolted toward him, paws thudding against gravel. The dog didn't hesitate. He crashed into the boy's arms, pushing against his chest, nuzzling his face, whimpering a sound filled with every ache, every lonely night, every missed day. Henry clung to him, sobbing openly. You waited. You really waited for me." Daniel stood silently beside the car, watching with glassy eyes, his hands clenched at his sides. He had prepared himself for disappointment, told himself it might not be true. But as he watched Bailey lick Henry's tear-streaked face with gentle urgency, he could no longer deny it. "Good boy," he murmured, his voice cracking. "You never gave up." Eli was already there, standing quietly near the mailbox, his camera forgotten by his side. He'd been waiting since 4 a.m., unable to sleep, afraid he might somehow miss the moment. But now that it was here, he couldn't film it. Some things were too sacred. He turned away, wiping the back of his hand across his face. From the diner across the field, Martha Bell stepped outside, wrapped in a heavy flannel coat. She had seen the headlights through her kitchen window and felt her heart tug. She didn't say a word, just stood near the fence line, watching. One by one, others appeared: Rick from the gas station, Lila, the schoolteacher, even old Mr. Granger with his cane. They stood in silence, drawn not by curiosity, but reverence. They had all watched the dog wait, day after day, never knowing for whom, and now they saw the answer. Bailey turned his head, still pressed against Henry, and looked at the crowd. His tail would get a full, sure movement, as if telling them it was okay now. His boy had come. Daniel finally approached and crouched beside them, resting a hand on Bailey's back. The dog didn't flinch. He leaned into it, let out a soft, shuddering breath, and closed his eyes. The man and the boy reunited with the dog they thought they had lost, and in that moment, the empty fields of Hopewell felt full. Eli finally stepped forward, offering a soft nod to Daniel. "Thank you," Daniel said simply, "for finding him." Eli shook his head. "He never left." Henry looked up, his voice shaking with gratitude. "Can we take him home?" Martha was the one who answered, stepping forward through the brittle grass. "He's waited long enough. He's ready." They stood together for a while longer before the Parker family finally turned to go. Bailey walked beside them, not in front, not behind, but shoulder to shoulder. As they reached the car, he paused and glanced back once, at the mailbox, the fields, the road. Then he climbed in without a sound. Hopewell watched them drive away, the car disappearing down the same road where Bailey had once been lost. But this time, he wasn't alone. The road home from Hopewell was quiet. Henry sat in the back seat with Bailey curled beside him, the Labrador's head resting on the boy's lap, tail occasionally thumping against the seat in slow, uncertain rhythm. Daniel drove in silence, occasionally glancing at them through the rearview mirror. The sun rose behind them, casting a pale orange hue over the snowy shoulders of the mountains. For a moment, it felt like the world was holding its breath. They returned to Bozeman just before noon. The Parker house was Modesta two-bedroom structure with beige siding, a wraparound porch, and a fenced backyard. It was tucked near the outskirts of town, where pine trees framed every window and deer sometimes wandered down the road at dawn. The house had been quiet for years. Now, it felt full again. But for Bailey, it was all unfamiliar. As they pulled into the driveway, Bailey lifted his head. He sniffed the air but didn't move. When Henry opened the car door, Bailey didn't bolt. Instead, he stepped down slowly, paws touching the pavement with hesitation, ears alert. His eyes darted across the yard, the porch, the open front door. He wasn't afraid, but he wasn't ready to trust it either. Inside, Henry gave Bailey space. He left a blanket near the fireplace and set a bowl of water beside the kitchen wall. "This is your house too now," he said softly. Bailey paced the living room, his nails clicking against the hardwood, nose pressed to corners, nostrils flaring as he searched for something familiar. He paused near the back door and stared out, motionless. Later that night, instead of lying on the blanket or Henry's bed, Bailey curled into himself near that door, tail tucked, eyes wide open in the dark. Daniel watched all of it quietly. He didn't say much, but he noticed everything. After dinner, he placed an old hoodie of Henry's beside Bailey. The next morning, it was still there, creased and unmoved, but the fur on it told a quieter truth. Bailey had touched it. The adjustment didn't happen overnight. The smallest sound startled him. The buzz of the microwave, the slam of a car door down the street, the rattle of keys. He would tense, eyes wide, body low. Once, during a thunderstorm, Bailey disappeared beneath Henry's bed, trembling so hard the frame shivered. But Henry didn't pull him out. He simply lay on the floor, reading aloud from one of his favorite books, where the red fern grouch's voice gentle, slow, constant. "It's okay," he'd say now and then. "You're home." Henry didn't push. He didn't beg Bailey to play or to sleep at his feet. He simply stayed. Every day after school, he sat in the living room with a book or a deck of cards, letting Bailey choose whether to come closer. Sometimes Bailey would watch from the doorway. Other times, he'd lie a few feet away, always quiet, always watchful. But little by little, the distance shrank. It was on the 11th morning one, colder than the rest, with frost webbing the window panes and the sky still pale, that Henry awoke to a weight beside his legs. He blinked, turned his head, and saw Bailey curled at the edge of his bed. Not on the blanket, not on the floor, but beside him, breathing slowly, deeply, one paw tucked under his chest, tail gently curled. Henry didn't move. He didn't dare. He just whispered, "Good morning," and reached out slowly to rest his hand on Bailey's neck. The dog didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes opened, met Henry's sand for the first time since Hopewell. His tail wagged without hesitation. Later that day, when Henry told his father, Daniel's expression barely changed, but his eyes softened. He remembers, he said, more to himself than to Henry. Weeks passed. The days grew shorter. Snow came early, blanketing the backyard in white. Bailey began exploring more. He would follow Henry into the yard, sniffing at the snow, sometimes chasing a wind-blown leaf. He barked for the first time, sharp, surprised sound at a squirrel that darted along the fence. It startled everyone, including Bailey himself, but Henry laughed and Bailey's tail wagged. There were still hard days. Nights when Bailey returned to the door, staring out as if searching for the mailbox. Sometimes, when Daniel left for work, the dog paced anxiously until he returned. Trust, it seemed, wasn't a switch to be flipped. It was a road, slow and winding. But the Parkers walked it with him, one quiet step at a time. The story of Bailey had spread far beyond Hopewell. Reporters reached out. Animal organizations offered interviews, fundraisers, awards. Eli Thompson declined most of them, instead choosing to write a long-form piece that was published in a regional magazine. The title, "The Dog Who Waited." At the center of it was a photo taken just before the reunion of Bailey staring down the road, ears forward, eyes sharp. Beneath it, a single line. "Sometimes love waits longer than we think it can." On a December evening, Henry found Bailey sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon as snowflakes drifted down. He sat beside him, jacket zipped to his chin, and rested his arm against the dog's side. "We're not going anywhere," he said. Bailey didn't turn, but after a moment, he leaned in. That night, as the family sat by the fireplace, Bailey lay across their feet, head resting on Henry's ankle, the flicker of flames dancing in his eyes. He was home not because he remembered the walls, but because he remembered the people. Healing takes time, and so does trust. Bailey's story reminds us that even after years of silence, love can still find its way home. What mattered wasn't a miracle, but the quiet, consistent presence of someone who refused to give up. Sometimes, the most powerful rescue isn't pulling someone from danger. It's staying with them long enough for their heart to believe they're safe again. If Bailey's story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Comment below with your thoughts, your own stories of loyalty, or just leave a simple "thank you" to all the animals who wait for us longer than they should. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell for more true stories of love, hope, and healing brought to you by Fearless Paws.